yepi Amita pendwa ya vintu ifisume vyoza bula kwibukisha Kana depotimo Wimbo wa temenu wa katongi Abazunga watita katongi Nagula kwibukisha kateka Kaibuku muna kapona Nenseko siove pameso Yangwa maume baya Iyaba maume Iyaba maume
Kateka wabantu Twakulila lelo twakulila Shikakukonke milimo shove Ale filamba Yena minta pengo sile Eti kume moku Londolo la vale Lilo wingi
Iseko wingi mwakwete Iseso wingi mwakwete Mwaya Mwende wino tata wesu
Katusi muchi wakege Wali bomba kale Lomba mwatu jatule lilake Mufanga na chiba
Benda Mpanga mwine Oye mwine Ide nalila
Yangu ya mama Ala na chumwavye Mama Good day and dear viewers, good day Zambia. On this beautiful Sunday, we coming to you live on various platforms. I wish to immediately apologize first to State Council Musa Mwenye. He was ready on time. But however, I was not ready. I have just gone to another state. We'll tell you about that later. And the whole logistical nightmare of setting up at a new place caught me. Let's see if I have volume. I've got Musa Mwenye, State Council. He was our Attorney General. He was Solicitor General. He was Law Association of Zambia President. He's held many positions in this government. He was the board chairperson for the Anti-Corruption Commission. We have brought him here to discuss the issue of the Constitution, issue of Bill 7. Why is President Hakainde Hichilema bringing this bill? Why is he determined to bring this bill? State Council Musa Mwenye, thank you for your patience and good day.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for having me. And the reasons for the delay are understandable.
Thank you
I
very
hope
much
we have
for
a good discussion.
No, I think so. And our audience are joining us. Guys, share. We are hosting Musa Mwenye, State Council. Like I've stated, is our former Attorney General, former Solicitor General, former last President. And he last held his position of SEC Board Chair. How have you been doing? Where have you been? You are quiet. What have you been? You are at?
No, I'm back in practice. I'm enjoying the practice of the law. That has been my work for a very long time now, except for brief periods when I've agreed to serve the nation in the capacities that you've just mentioned. So I'm buried my head in law books and litigating.
Oh, wonderful. Bill 7 appears to be a nightmare to our country, to the legal fraternity, stakeholders, civil society groupings, political parties. But it appears President Hakainde Hichilema is determined to cause these constitutional amendments. Just open the subject. Where are we and why do we need these constitutional amendments?
I'm not sure I can answer the question as to why we need the constitutional amendment, but I can speak to the fact that at the last time this matter was being pursued in Parliament, there was a judgment of the court over the bill. And the Constitutional Court made a very clear decision by majority of the court that the process was unconstitutional for lack of consultation. And the directive from the court was that a broad-based group of experts should be constituted to build consensus and consult the people. Now, this is important. It's very important that we look at the constitutional making process in its holistic sense and why the court would decide what it did. And this stems from 25 years ago when we decided as a country, really, it became apparent that the way we were making constitutions at that time was not consultative enough. So we decided to bifurcate the process, to split it into two processes, which rendered the process more consultative than it had been. That is the adoption process and the enactment process. The difficulty with Bill 7 is that it's gone straight into the enactment process, meaning the Ministry of Justice has drafted the contents of this bill, and then the consultation process is part of the enactment process, because when you publish in the Gazette, the consultation process that is being done is so that the bill can go to Parliament. Now, when the process was bifurcated, we started having, initially, there would be this group of people who would go out and gather the views of the people and look at the different sectors of society, the different interest group, and decide what needed to be amended and how it needed to be amended, and the text. Then you would have a broad-based group who would discuss this. So you would have the constitutional review commissions that would go around. You know, we had the Chona Commission in the 70s. We had the Mvunga Commission, the Mwanakatwe Commission, the Mungomba Commissions of constitutional commissions of constitutional review commissions. These gathered the views of the people because the Constitution is so important. It builds cohesion in the society, but it's what binds us together. It sets the rules and the groundwork of what the social contract between the governed and the governors, and between the governed ourselves. These are the Grund norm. This is the Grund norm of the country, which is the cement of society. It can't be lightly changed, particularly when you are dealing with issues of elections and other contentious matters. So the difficulty now is that we have a constitutional court judgment that basically decided that the current process was unconstitutional. Now, that is where we are. Whether that bill can be taken to Parliament now, my simple answer is that that would be contrary to the judgment of the court, and it is potentially problematic. And I think it ought not to be done in that manner.
State Council, when you hear the Speaker of the National Assembly state that she's waiting for Ministry of Justice to retable Bill 7, she was recently visiting Muchinga province, where she was commissioning parliamentary offices, constituency offices in Shuangandu and in Kanchibia. And again, she issued a statement there where she stated that the chiefs are wondering when Bill 7 will come back, return to Parliament. The agitation by government, they use arguments like they need youth represented in the next Parliament, and they've offered 12 seats for them. They say they need 20 women represented in Parliament through this mixed member proportion that they are proposing. When you hear those arguments, that there's nothing inimical in the Bill 7, and they're treating it as like those opposing it are just malicious, like President Hakainde Hichilema wants an inclusive government, and they are presenting it like whoever is opposing Bill 7 is just being malicious. What do you say when you hear that?
I think let me start from the process of constitutional making. As I've said, I'm on record as having opposed very strongly Bill 10 I think it was 2021 or 2019. I opposed that bill very strongly. But that process, the Bill 10 process, is better than what we have now in terms of consultation. There was at least some sort of consultation, and I'll tell you why. From a long time ago, I'm on record as having had conversations with President Mwanawasswa on the constitutional making process. Unfortunately, out of those conversations and the activism we did during that time, we came to a place where now you had laws that would create these broad-based bodies that would debate the Constitution. So, under President Mwanawasswa, we had the National Constitutional Conference. It had an act of parliament that determined the procedure for adopting the Constitution. It determined who would be a member of the NCC. It determined how they would vote. It had a chairperson. It had a well-functioning secretariat. So, if there was an argument that people wanted this, we would know that so many LAS members attended. We would know that so many members of the church were in that group. So it is sector groups that were consulted through that process. Of course, that bill failed in Parliament, and we also opposed the manner in which the Constitution was done. But there was a broad-based group of people that developed what ought to be amended and then came up with a draft. It wasn't Ministry of Justice. Come to Bill 10. Bill 10 also had a National Dialogue Forum and a National Dialogue Forum Act. It had a procedure, it had members that went there, it had a voting mechanism, and we were able to determine that this is the way this body will pick the clauses. Now, we oppose the Bill 10 process. I would be a complete hypocrite if I supported a process that is worse than the Bill 10 process. Because this process does not have the adoption process. It does not have a mechanism to determine which people want these amendments. It doesn't have that. So with due respect to public officers that may be saying certain sectors of society want this, let's say, allude to the chiefs, for example. How do we determine how many chiefs want that? What is the voting mechanism to determine so many chiefs want it? This is a democracy. Institutions must exist to verify how we are going down certain important roads in terms of the processes that we want to institute to change the status quo in constitutionalism. That Bill 10 process had the National Dialogue Forum. Now, the question is this: who determined what should be amended? Who determined the text of those amendments? And what are the effects? So the process is problematic because process protects content. If a process is agreed, and the National Constitutional Conference process, the National Dialogue Forum process, which produced the Bill 10, we argued about the process. Here we jumped to the content without even dealing with a modicum of consultation. That is what the Constitutional Commission, the Constitutional Court decided on, that we are a democracy and there must be consultation. You see, constitutional making is not about legality, because even apartheid was legal, but it was not legitimate. Okay, even slavery was legal, but it was not legitimate. When you are dealing with a constitutional making process, you must look at the legitimacy of the document, the wide acceptability of that document. That's even before we get to the contents. We must deal with how the document is made. Okay, and this process is problematic. Now, the court has made a decision. The Constitution says all public officers must promote the independence, dignity, and effectiveness of the judiciary. And that's what all public officers must do. Whether or not they like a judgment, it is a judgment. The problem with disobeying judgments of the court, especially by the state, is that the state leads in promoting anarchy. That is not what Zambia is about. Zambia is about the rule of law. For the past several years, since the reintroduction of multi-party politics and the Third Republic, we have stuck to the rule of law. That they should be rule of law rather than rule by law, using the law to rule. We must all observe the law, the governed and the governors. Now, the obeying court judgments has problems at several levels. Number one, if the government leads in disobeying a court judgment, what are they saying to us citizens with regards to court judgments? It's a problem. It may look harmless now, but it breeds self-help and impunity, which is a problem in society. The second thing is investment. What are we saying to investors? If they come here, pour in their money, can they run to court and protect themselves against the government actions? Or will the government just ignore court judgments? It also affects investment and the development of the country. Finally, and this I talk to the MPs that are in parliament, it's not always that you are in the good graces of the government. If you remember, my own boss, the late President Michael Sata, was part of the formulation of the theft of motor vehicle law. What law caught him up? It is the protection of the court that saved him. Now, today you may be in the good graces of government, but tomorrow you may need that same court that passed that judgment or other courts. What are you saying as the president with regards to your own protection of your rights, should you need that court to protect you? Politics is fluid. Today you may be here, tomorrow you may be out of the good graces of a government. It is the court that protects people. Even under the one-party state, the courts were protecting people. We must protect the independence, dignity, and effectiveness of the judiciary. Okay, so that is on the process. Let's go to the content of that bill, because I've heard people talking about the content.
By the speaker's remarks right after the Constitutional Court threw out Bill 7, and the Constitutional Court was very clear, even listed the number of constitutional articles that the president had breached in his process to attempt to amend the Constitution, that he breached so many articles of the Constitution. But the Speaker said Parliament is independent, is autonomous, and cannot be directed by any court or court action or court directive. He said, we don't interfere with what they do and they don't interfere with what we do. The Speaker was extremely arrogant about our independence. Now, I'd like to give you an example and matters that you followed. I had just joined the late president, the second president, Dr. Frederick Chiluba. And shortly after, I think I was with him just a few months, shortly after that, they lifted his immunity. And the police, after his immunity was lifted, were already at his residence to attempt to begin to search him and probably even arrest him. But his lawyers then, John Sangwa and Robert Smeza, immediately brought an action to stay the decision of the National Assembly to lift the immunity of the president and request for a judicial review. You are lawyers, I might not have the particular architecture of how that was done. But what I remember was that there was a court order against Parliament and this decision to lift the immunity of the late president. And that process was stayed for 2 years. Attorney General, on behalf of the state and on behalf of National Assembly and lawyers for Parliament, battled it out, arguing if the decision to lift the immunity of the late president was valid or not. And Chiluba, for that entire duration, was not searched, touched, or arrested. They could have touched people around him. So when you hear the Speaker says they can't interfere with what we do, to what extent is that autonomy she's talking about is? To what extent autonomy she's talking about is?
No, when I hear those comments, I hope that these public officers are being misquoted. Because it's not true that there is any institution in this country that is immune to court oversight. There is no decision that is not judicially reviewable in this country. And especially now when we have the new constitution and the constitutional court, the processes are enhanced. All public officers and officials must respect court judgments. We must do that because these are for our own protection and for the cohesion of our country. Why is the court important? It's a necessary safety valve. There should never be a time when people feel that they cannot seek protection from a court. Because in this country, we don't use self-help. You can't take matters into your own hands because we are people under law. And the reason for that is if Musa Mwenye is aggrieved, he goes to court to seek protection. It can't be the government that is in the forefront of disobeying court judgments. That is a precedent that we will live to regret if it's insisted upon. There is a court judgment. It's important that we respect that court judgment, whether we like it or not. There are a lot of judgments that have been passed against people. Some of them even declare on the liberty of individuals. People have been convicted, okay? People have had assets forfeited. People have lost jobs and gone to court, and some of them have been reinstated. What are we saying with all those people with regards to accepting the decisions of the court? The cohesion of this nation depends on the respect of the institutions that we have built for ourselves. So for me, those comments, if they are true, are extremely unfortunate and should never have been made. Okay, because at the end of the day, we have systems and we have institutions. Now, I've read quite widely and I know that the development of nations depends on the strength of institutions rather than individuals in those institutions. And what we are doing is laying the bedrock for regression in national development and also erosion of our democracy and democratic backsliding. I don't think that that's the way we should go. We shouldn't go that way. We should insist on the respect of institutions and the respect of court judgments. So on the process, the court has pronounced itself. Now, the Constitution is very clear that all of us have a duty to resist contravening the duty and the right, essentially, to not allow the Constitution to be breached. So what we are doing here, having this conversation, is the exercise of that duty in Article 2. Every government official, from the top down, that is our duty, to make sure that this Constitution is observed. In any case, we take an oath in which we hold the Bible, lift our hands and say we will defend the Constitution as by law established. So for me, my hope is that the Speaker was misquoted, because there cannot be any instance where there are offices or institutions in this country that are immune to court judgments. And I think there is a judgment of the court. The state was represented in that case. If indeed that was the position, that should have been raised as a preliminary issue to say Parliament can't be stopped. But the Solicitor General led that team that represented the government, participated in the hearing, and there was a judgment of the court. It has to be respected.
Thank you very much. To our dear viewers, again, we wish to apologize that we started late. This is to my circumstances that I've explained, that I've traveled to another state, and flight connections and details and, you know, all those delayed my setup. And but we are here. I've got State Counsel Musa Mwene. Share the broadcast. We are privileged that we are discussing the issue of Bill 7 and attempts by the state to reintroduce Bill 7. State Counsel, let me now draw you to still matters of the law and to where your heart is, the issues of human rights. You fought for human rights. You have a famous case against KCM and for the community of Chingola. I think you were involved in that part. But my point is, you have the U.S. State Department annual country report citing Zambia for bad human rights practices. They are stifling freedom of expression, stifling freedom of association, assembly, that the state is in the habit of refusing for the opposition and critics of the president to participate in the political process, and the enactment of these bad laws. We recently had the special rapporteur, Ms. Khan, who visited our country. She heads the United Nations Human Rights Commission. She's a special rapporteur on freedom of expression issues, and she visited our country. The final report has been tabled. It hasn't been any better. She has almost stood by our initial alarm that she had issued last year, that Zambia is breaching human rights and especially freedom of expression and, you know, freedom of assembly, freedom of speech and freedom of the media. You have the PF, you know, where it appears there is concerted coordination of one mind, actually, between the Judicial Parliament and the executive. What is the state of the country in that light? I saw the recent, again, Human Rights Watch also refer to the same state of human rights. Now, you have a government that says, no, we've improved things. Things were bad under PF. But when you look at the records and the sightings by these credible international institutions, then you realize that there's something of concern. In fact, there's another matter. The president hasn't been to the UN General Assembly. This is second year in a row. Because when he was about to come last year, the UN issued this very bad report about Zambia. I think for one reason or another, he must have chosen to stay away. This year, he has also stayed away.
Ambassador, maybe before you move to those other issues
in our country.
Yeah, maybe before we start talking about those issues, I would like to go back to Bill 7. I think because the problem is people, when we talk about the process and the court process and so on, people are quick to say, but what is wrong in the bill itself? And I just want to very briefly talk about it. Even the contents of the bill are problematic, okay? There are a few concerns. For example, the people of Zambia have consistently said in all the constitutional review commissions, okay, and the collection of views, the discussions from the citizens, that they don't want a president to have the power to nominate MPs. But this bill, if indeed it looks at the views of the people, when did the people change so that the nominated MPs should be increased from 8 to 10? Okay? Let's talk about mixed member proportional representation that a lot has been talked about. Of course, the proposal is that a maximum of 20, the 20 seats should be reserved for the women, 12 for the youths, and 3 for the disabled. Now, the numbers themselves, in terms of the total number of MPs, I think the increase is by 100 MPs if you look at the total to 226, if I'm not mistaken. But when you look at the numbers, for example, of the disabled, 3, the women 20. There is already a constitutional clause, Article 259, which says that in making appointments or nominations, 50% must be reserved for women. So if we are serious about inclusiveness in women and getting to the 50% threshold, how many PSs are women? How many appointments in judges are women? How many appointments of DCs are women? There is so many places you can make those appointments. Okay. Now, let's move from there to talking about how these mixed member proportional representation will be done. There is the direct vote in the elected 211. Those others that will be under the mixed member proportional representation system, the women, the youths, and the physically challenged. What the proposal is in the law is that the Electoral Commission shall allocate, it will be the Electoral Commission to allocate to political parties represented in Parliament according to the proportional representation ballot. What is that proportional representation ballot? It's not clear. How will the Electoral Commission be the one to allocate to MPs? It's not clear. To political parties represented in government. It's not clear. Let's talk about the life of Parliament that is being extended. Bill 7 says the life of the Parliament will stand dissolved a day before the election. But the same bill says for 90 days before that election, Parliament will not conduct any business, okay, or engage in any of its usual duties in terms of the Parliament. Why are we keeping parliamentarians for 90 days when they are not working? What is the purpose for this? Why should Parliament only be dissolved 1 day before the election, but stop working 90 days before? For me, there doesn't seem to be an economic or social reason. It appears the only plausible reason could be political. So those clauses, for me, are not progressive. They are actually not helpful to our democracy. We can look at a few other clauses later, but I just to show, and also let's talk about the delimitation. A lot has been said about our constituencies being too large. We must be careful. I think it's Article 59.
You are right, Council, State Council. Maybe I'll let the countries, some of the proposals that this government is pushing that could actually be dangerous to our national democracy, or why they need broad and wide consensus. For example, if he's expanding Parliament by a number of 58 or more, including delimitation, that would be about 103. I think that was my last count, 103. If you're expanding Parliament from the current 156 to 256 by 100. Clearly that needs stakeholders to approve. If you are changing the electoral system by bringing in this mixed member proportion, clearly you need stakeholders to agree. The delimitation of these constituencies are in themselves a very serious issue. So I'm glad that you brought that up and you can then answer comprehensively.
Yeah, so the delimitation itself is provided in Article 59. I've heard some public officials talking about, no, these constituencies are geographically too large. When you read Article 59, it is not the size geographically that should be considered. It is the size demographically of these constituencies, meaning you look at the number of people in the constituency. So if we are going to delimit, we must look at the numbers where they are now. Even when you go down that line of delimitation, it's a very contentious process. What criteria was used? Can we have sight of the delimitation report as concerned citizens? See where these constituencies are, which will be delimited, or which will be split into several constituencies, because it creates a problem in future. If this is not done transparently and consultatively, what will happen is there may be a perception that these constituencies largely are in strongholds of one party or the other. That becomes a problem. It's a serious problem and it creates difficulties. So if there is a proposal for delimitation, that is why that proposal should be given to a wide consultative group, and we should know where this delimitation ought to happen and how it was determined that these areas are that. Is it the population, for example? Will Matero be split in several constituencies because it is dense? Would we have more constituencies in Mandevu because it's dense? Those are the questions. Because these constituencies, some of them, are larger than several districts in terms of population. Now, that is where the contention comes in. Even there needs to be a broad-based consultation on what this looks like in terms of delimitation. So we don't want controversy over national matters as important as a constitution. It is better to be more consultative, and even now, if the government is of the view that this is an important thing to do at this moment, it can be done properly. Although, in my own view, I think the timing is not correct, because if you are going to look at the rules of elections and change them shortly before the election without consulting everyone, it creates problems. So it's not only the process that is problematic, it is also the content of Bill 7 that raises concern. There is no reason why parliamentarians should continue being paid for doing nothing for 3 months when our people are suffering. Why does Bill 7 have that provision? There are people in our villages, there are people in the compounds that are going without food, and then there is this provision that says for 90 days the parliamentarians will not work, they will not do anything, but then they will only stop working a day before the elections. Why should ministers continue to be ministers for 90 days when parliament is not working? So those are problematic, and that's why we have to have a conversation. Perhaps the government has a good reason for such kind of things, but the conversation must be had. Debate must be had. It must not be rushed. Let's talk about this thing in a structured, legally backed process that allows people to debate these issues.
Yeah, I think that's been my hurdle, the issue of just Bill 7 and the unjustified rush. What should be done by civil society, by political parties, by the church, by stakeholders, before the president addressed the National Assembly last week? Stafford Mulusa, Solwezi Central Member of Parliament, who is holding a very key position of Chief chief government whip says in this session, Bill 7 is coming back. So it's like they are mute to our advice. They are mute to the concerns of the people. They are mute to your analysis that can we deal with the issue of the constitution after elections. What can be done in this late hour? Do we have to go to court? Do we have to picket? What needs to be done? Now people are getting exasperated. As you heard, Mulusa says, no, Bill 7 is coming, it's our right. We are MPs and we are government, and one of our duties was to enact the constitution.
No, I mean, whatever we must do must be legal. We must do things within the confines of the law. And one of the things is what we are doing now, having a conversation. Let's have this debate. Let's have this conversation. Let's continue talking to each other so that we exchange ideas, debate these issues. These are not personal issues. It's not about liking people or not. These are matters of principle. Our patriotic duty is to this country and not to any political formation, any region, any individuals. It's to this country. It's to this country that we owe a duty to maintain our democracy, because Zambia is a democracy. And at the end of the day, to get to this place where we are a democracy, the people of Zambia fought for this democracy. We must maintain this democracy. Now, I say that the commemoration of the International Day of Democracy not too long ago, that Zambia was a democratic state for 8 years after independence. And our leaders at that time had been democratically elected. Those who are younger may not remember this or know this, but there are books we read about these things. Okay, they were democratically elected, and those democratically elected leaders who came into power through the ballot ended up ushering us into a one-party state. Okay? Now, it is our duty to ensure that we keep this democracy. And you know, for 18 or so years, we were a one-party state until the reintroduction of multi-party politics in 1991. It is that history that taught us that we must be democratic. Why? We knew the difficulties we faced in the one-party state. Okay. We must continue to promote competitive politics and to have the position where we can discuss respectfully, of course, not insulting each other, not vitriol, but we must discuss respectfully and discuss national matters of national importance. And this is what we are doing right now. The conversation must continue. Some of us, you know that I served under President Michael Sata. Internally, I was critical even then when there were one or two things that I didn't agree with, and fortunately, at least my working relationship with him, he listened.
Thank you.
And then, of course,
now, broadly, before I invite my callers,
I went back into private practices. I criticized even the former government. And now we are in a position where we can criticize this current not because we hate ill will, because we love this country, and what is being said is actually the truth. It is the truth, it is what is supposed to be done, and it doesn't matter which government would be in office, would still say the same thing.
Yeah, Council, I don't know if you got me. I was saying, what is now the state of the country? In general?
No, well, I think there is. Can you hear me, Ambassador?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
Okay. The issue here is that If we are not careful, our democracy may be endangered. And I choose my words very carefully. If we are not careful, there are issues that have happened that are worrying. For example, the decision to just ignore the court judgment. As a lawyer who has law in these courts for years, that is something that concerns me. As a Democrat, it is, and that is a substantial red flag that cannot be ignored. Any person that calls themselves a Democrat, it cannot be ignored because it's a serious problem. You can't have one arm of government pitted against the judiciary and insisting that they won't observe the judgment of the court. It's not proper, it's not okay, it's not acceptable under any circumstances for the reasons I've given. And I said even the MPs who are in the parliament from the arm where even Madam Speaker herself, if she were to seek the solace of the courts for her own protection, she would want that judgment to be respected by the state. Any person is one step away from being in trouble with the state. Anyone. There were people who were close to governments who ended up not being close with that same government. Not a different government, the same government. There are people who were in the good graces of a current government who ended up not being in the good graces of that same current government. Now, those MPs right up to the top, would they want a judgment in their favor protecting them not being respected? And the answer is no. So for me, that is a substantial red flag. And as I said, my hope is that the speaker was misquoted. That is my hope, that the speaker was misquoted, because I can't imagine a situation where the speaker of our National Assembly can publicly say that a judgment of the court ought to be disobeyed. I just can't imagine that position. So my hope is that she was misquoted, because Madam Speaker is a state counsel and a person who I worked with for a long time in advancing human rights and speaking. We went to Malawi with the Madam Speaker when we were both in civil society circles to speak for the Malawians at the time when President Bakiri Muluzi was seeking a third term. We went there to mobilize so that we don't see a breach of the constitution there. I can't imagine any situation where Madam Speaker can advocate for ignoring a court judgment. I can't imagine that. So my hope is that she was misquoted. So to answer your question, there are concerns. This is one of them.
Unfortunately, State Council, she was not misquoted.
There are concerns. Well, I'm being a diplomat here, which is very unlike me.
She came on the floor of the House and made it very clear. In fact, some of your colleagues have called for laws to sanction her in her capacity as a lawyer.
Yeah. So in terms of some of the laws that we have seen, and I can't speak too much about the cybersecurity laws because those matters are in court, but there are certain laws that have been passed that are inimical to democracy. The proposed NGO Act, I'm glad, and we should commend the government for putting that on hold, but that was a concern. The Lands and Deeds Registry Act, which sought to deny people their title to land without any court process, that's another concerning thing. The journalism bill was a concerning thing. And there are a raft of laws, and that's why I would appeal to those officials in the Attorney General's chambers. It's a worrying sign when our Ministry of Justice, the majority of the bills that are being churned out of that Department of Government are regressing democracy instead of enhancing democracy. We must enhance this democracy, and that is why every year there is a requirement that in the Constitution that the President addresses Parliament to talk about how we are enhancing the directive principles of the state. And one of the most important directive principles of the state is that we should continue advancing our democracy. And this, I can't emphasize this enough. We are a democratic country plural in terms of our politics. And we must respect that and continue advancing that particular issue. Go back to where we were before 1991. We must continue advancing our democracy.
Yeah, as I invite callers, there's a recently new law that was passed, the Superior Court's law, I think, to expand first the number of judges in the Supreme Court, number of judges in the Constitutional Court, and numbers of judges in the High Court. Your dear brother, elder brother, John Sangwa, has, I think, expressed alarm at this law. It's been fast-tracked and it's now law. And there's already a process to fill these new vacancies that were created by this new law in the Constitutional Court, in the Supreme Court, and in the High Court. There is debate by government that the workload and the number of judges per capita per our people is so low that you need to expand the judges. But I don't know what your views are, whether, again, this is like Bill 7, where the president is using his appointing authority and opportunity to staff the court with people he thinks are of like mind, and in the eventuality of anything, including electoral petition, that he will have secured himself. What are your thoughts about this? I don't know if you have paid attention to it.
There are certain areas where you need more judges. And the argument is valid. But the point that we have always advocated in the past, and I'm on record as having said this, is the appointment of judges. We must move to a place where the appointments are on merit. Now, the law has not changed, but the position we must, I know now there are interviews that are being carried out. This was not the case years back. I remember it would just be by invitation. So that process needs to be enhanced to have more merit-based appointments to the bench, because this helps the quality of judgment, this helps the dispensation of justice, and enhances the protection and respect of the rights of individuals, whether it's commercial rights, whether it's human rights. All these go to court, because the law in certain cases is what the court says it is. So to that extent, I would say that we need to focus more on merit of these judges. We need to get people of high caliber, and the recruitment process, we must move towards enhancing the recruitment process. There are countries like South Africa and Kenya, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Kenya, where the appointment of judges is done, the interview of judges is done on national television. It's live, so that people can see the quality and the caliber of the people that are being appointed. And that a transparent process gives us high caliber judges, hopefully. So I think that my short answer to your question is that there is need for movement towards a merit-based recruitment system that is more enhanced than what we have now.
Dear viewers, if you are joining us right now, you can now call Musa Mwenye, State Counsel, is our special guest today. He is former Attorney General of the Republic of Zambia. He is former Solicitor General of the Republic of Zambia. He is former Law Association of Zambia President. He is former SEC Board Chair, and he has just stepped back into practice once again after serving the state with distinction. If you have any call, please call right now. We may not take as much numbers of calls like we do all the time. This is because we started very late, and we have very limited time. So use the opportunity, make the call right now, and ask your question to Musa Mwenye, State Counsel. I've got the first caller. Caller, please ask Musa Mwenye, State Counsel.
I've got the first caller. Good evening, State Council. Good evening, Your Excellency Emmanuel Mwamba.
Good evening.
My question to Council, I actually have two. The first one, we've seen, the current Attorney General actually take the family of the former president to court in South Africa. What would you have done differently if you were in his shoes? Then the second thing is looking at the current position and you being, one of those blends that Zambia has actually produced in legal terms. What is your take with the current position and composition of ECZ? Do you think that we can hold a free and fair election in the state that ECZ is? I thank you.
Thank you very much. Two questions there. If you were Attorney General, would you have taken the late president's widow to court like your successor has done? And the second, the current state of ECZ is of worry. Good afternoon. Good evening. Please tell us your name and where you are calling us from.
Good evening, Ambassador Mwamba, and thank you for bringing State Council Musa Mwenye. State Council Musa Mwenye, I'm your fan, and thank you for coming. You've clearly explained a lot of issues here, and thank you so much for the service to our nation. I've got a few questions. I'll browse through so quickly. There is a saying that absolute power absolutely corrupts. It appears that our president still have so much power, just like Kaunda had. Because when we changed the constitution, we only changed the multi-party clause. We never looked at the powers Kaunda has. The current president still has so much power, just like Kaunda. What should we do? Secondly, we've got devolution in our constitution. It's provided for in our constitution. And it's one of the ways we can devolve the powers of that president or reduce the powers of that president. Why hasn't it been implemented? Then the next question, State Council. You were the chairman of anti-corruption, and you did a good job, and eventually you resigned. One, why did you resign? And then two, why should the president appoint Musa Mwenye as the chairman, and also appoints the director general? I lived in South Africa, in the UK. The president nominates a certain number of people. I think 5, to be chairman of enforcement agencies, and then the parliament ratifies. They pick one person, and that becomes the chairman. And it's the duty of the chairman to constitute the board. And it's the duty of the board to appoint the director general. And the director general reports to the chairman, Musa Mwenye, in this case. Why have we allowed a situation where the director general reports to the president, the chairman reports to the president, and it becomes an issue? I think these are the things that should be appearing in Bill 7 than the nonsense that is in Bill 7. And then the next question by Musa Mwenye, Mopani deal. It also talks about so much power of that president. IRH wasn't shortlisted, but somebody pushed it in, and then it was supposed to be subject to parliamentary scrutiny. It never happened. What is your say about that? And then looking at that, in South Africa, even in Zambia, we've got the Office of the Investigator General, who is called the Public Protector. You remember state capture, remember the issue of Zuma. It was the Public Protector who investigated Zuma. In case of Mopani, which looked like maladministration, which falls under the duties of the Public Protector, the Public Protector should have investigated that. Why is that our Public Protector is quiet and has never spoken about the Mopani deal? Can you comment on that? And last but not the least, Bamwenye, there is a saying that he who pays the piper calls the tune. It looks like A lot of our president, because the HH we see in State House is not the same HH I know. I worked with HH for a long time. He's a different person. To me, one of the reasons might be he's captured. And when are we going? The only way we can avoid presidents being captured is to regulate the donations to the political parties. This has appeared in a number of constitution commissions. I think the last commission, I think the Mwamba Commission, it was in there, but I don't know why it was left out. And we need to regulate the political parties. We need to know where the donations are coming from. The former South African Attorney General actually agitates or calls for the state funding of political parties to avoid state capture. I rest my case.
Thank you very much. Hello, caller. Please tell us your name and where you are calling us from.
Good evening, Ambassador. My name is, as usual, Mrs. Anonymous from the AI Kingdom.
Yes, Mrs. Anonymous.
Yes, I wish to greet Council Mwenya for the great job that he has done to actually articulate the issues very well on Bill 7, on a number of issues. My main focus for me is on Bill 7. I think, Ambassador, somehow you touched on my question that I wanted to ask Council Mwenya, which is when you look at the way things have unfolded in our country, where we see UPND government and almost all the CEOs of these institutions, for instance, the Vanelli Muti, really breaking the law with impunity. And then you ask yourself to say, okay, people have spoken. We've seen articles. We have a colleague, Tandiwa Curtis. She has written so many articles on Bill 7. I've seen, I think Queen Pumi, she's one of the people who has spoken on Bill 7. I've seen Lillian Mutambo speaking about Bill 7. I've seen Shishua write articles about Bill 7. The Laz has spoken about Bill 7. The civil society has spoken about Bill 7. And a number of patriotic Zambians, including myself, because I've spoken about Bill 7. We've spoken and spoken, but we look like whatever we are speaking is landing on the deaf ear of the UPND government. And then it comes to a point to say, what do we do to make sure that this thing does not go forward? What do you do? What do? We go to the courts. We've seen Celestina Mkandira Munia Zulu take the government to court. They have something which Vanelli Muti has just decided not to follow. Then you ask yourself, what do we do? I asked this question to you, Council Mwenya. The lawyers themselves, the judges themselves, these are the people who should be guiding us in terms of how we should go. But the courts are being captured. We can't go and get justice from the courts because if the judgment that was passed in the Constitutional Court, Nelly Moot says she can't do it. And she said it. You have been very diplomatic in the way you are saying, but we will not be diplomatic because we will call a spade a spade. She said that. And if the people who are supposed to protect the Zambians are the ones who are in the forefront of violating the laws, what do we do? You are saying, yes, this is a democratic country. We should protect the democracy in this country. But then the institutions that are supposed to help us protect the democracy that we're talking about have been paralyzed, compromised. What do we do? Please, guide us. You people, guide us.
Thank you. Hello, caller. Please tell us your name and where you are calling us from.
Good evening, Ambassador Mwamba, and good evening, State Council. My full names are Isaac Mwanza. I'm calling from within Lusaka.
Yes, Isaac Mwanza.
Yeah, no, good evening, State Council. I want to begin by first being very clear here that I am one of the persons that support an amendment to the Constitution in order to clean up some of the bad things that are in the Constitution, some of the things that require cleaning. And at the same time, as State Council, I realize that Bill 7 is not a perfect bill. And I'm one of those people that attended a meeting at State House with other civil society organizations together with the Law Association of Zambia. And we are very clear in that meeting to the president that indeed Bill 7 has the positives and the things that would regress our democracy. Now, having said this, as State Council, I know you as former Attorney General, you are very much aware of the constitutional amendment process and the court process. And I agree with you that there is need to respect court decisions, but it doesn't mean we cannot disagree with the court decision. A number of court decisions, I think that if you remember the Edgar Chagwalungu case has come before the court several times until the president of the court, which stood for 5 times, was reversed by the same court. The issue of the ministers paying back came into court 3-4 times. The issue of President Lungu is back in court again because some people disagree with the reasoning of the court. Why I've said this, State Council, is that I do not agree entirely with the reasoning of the court, and I want to state to you why I do not agree with the reasoning of the court in the decision on Bill 7. And this is the reason that if you look at constitutional making, you as a former Attorney General, you would know that constitutional making and constitutional amendment are 2 different processes. And in my understanding, when we are making a constitution, there is need for wider public consultation because it is a new document that you are coming up with. You want each and every Zambian to have an opportunity to be consulted. But when you are amending a constitution or constitutional alteration, you cannot proceed with a constitutional amendment first without a proposal on what you want to amend. And I believe that when you are the Attorney General, that is the approach that you took, that first there must be a proposal on the table, and this proposal is what you are going to subject to a consultation with the people. And the people that you consult with in that amendment is a limited consultation process where you consult stakeholders, people that can make an input into it. I've said this, State Council, just to tell you where I have a difference with in terms of the approach of the court and the decision that they made. Much as we need to respect that decision, I don't think I would agree that what they were discussing was a constitutional amendment. They were discussing a constitutional making process by trying to make a new constitution. Now, going forward, the State Council, I also want to state that yes, Bill 7
please wind up. There are so many calls waiting. Please wind up.
Thank you, Ambassador. In winding up, State Council, I would like you to reflect on the fact that if we went with that route of trying to consult on any bill, that whenever we want to amend the Constitution, we subject it to consultation. How can I, as a citizen, who can initiate amendments to the Constitution under Article 88, go to consult? What about the members of Parliament who can propose an amendment to the Constitution? Are they required to do a wider consultation before proposing those amendments? So I would like you to reflect on this, and especially to address the issue of constitutional making and constitutional amendment. Thank you, State Council. And thank you, Ambassador Mwamba.
Thank you. Hello, caller, please tell us your name and where you're calling us from.
Good evening, Ambassador Mwamba. This is Lilian Motambo calling you from the United Kingdom.
Yes, Lilian.
And good evening, State Council, Musa Mwenye. I have 2 questions. My first question is in regards to our diplomatic relationships and how the UPND spokesperson, media spokesperson, has disrespected the American ambassador. What's your opinion on the way they've taken you know, in terms of addressing issues, the threats that have been said to Ambassador Gonzalez, bearing in mind that as Zambian people, we depend heavily on donations from America. And then secondly, I wanted to ask about the issues of protocol when it comes to somebody like Chavinga, who is a Patriotic Front member that also issued threats to our diplomats from different countries. He was giving a talk at one time saying that he knows that they have relationships and friendships with other political parties. At what stage would you come in as a state council? And then also, with the fact that you're a part of the SEC, we've heard that 5 ministers are supposed to be persecuted, but President Hakainde Hichilema has never persecuted anybody. How would you judge how the current chairperson of SEC is handling SEC corruption that is taking place among the ministers, and also with President Hakainde Hichilema? Do you think he has handled corruption well or not?
Thank you,
Lillian.
Lillian.
Is on the impasse in South Africa. What is your opinion on how the current Attorney General is handling the matter? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Last caller, so that we can now go back to Honorable Musa Mwenye, State Council. Hello, caller, please tell us your name and where you are calling us from.
Good evening, Ambassador Mwamba.
Good evening.
Good evening, State Council. This is Sencho Banda.
Yes, Sencho Banda.
Yeah. Firstly, allow me to underscore that the Constitution, the supreme law of the land, is a common thread which holds us together in as far as how we apply ourselves in the democratic space. With that said, the fact is provided for in Article 1.1 of the Constitution, which says that
he's gone. I don't know what has happened. State Council, but it is very clear. I think you've got a summary of what our people are concerned. Kindly take those questions.
Let me start with Mr. Mwanza's contribution. I think I got his name correct. We respect his view and the fact that he disagrees with the decision of the court. What we are dealing with here is not disagreeing with the decision. It's disobeying the decision. We of course, we critique judgments all the time. We would disagree and not even like certain judgments. What holds us as a country together is respecting court decisions. We must not denigrate the courts. We must not get into a place where government institutions themselves lead in reducing the respectability of the courts. No. That is not the correct thing to do, because that is unconstitutional behavior, because the Constitution requires public officials deliberately. There is a clause in the Constitution that requires public officials to promote the independence, dignity, and effectiveness of the judiciary. So the government can be in the forefront of whittling down the independence of the judiciary. Now, in fact, Mr. Mwanza is wrong. With due respect to you, sir, we have never made a new constitution. That's why even the current constitution in 2016 is called the Constitutional Amendment Act number 2. We've never had a situation where we have had a new constitution. We always have amendments to the constitution. In 1991, we had an amendment particularly to a constitutional clause, I think it was Article 4, that brought in liberal politics. So every one of the constitutional making ventures that we have done has been an amendment. So that distinction you draw is not true. The fact of the matter is that every time we must amend the constitution, especially on very contentious matters, there must be wide consultation. That has been the practice, okay? Now, it is important that that procedure is followed, because the rigidity of the procedure itself prevents willy-nilly amendments. A constitution is not something that you should just wake up and amend anytime. Constitutional amendments must be kept to the minimum, okay, and only amended at very critical times. So the laborious process is itself important to limit amendments at any time. So that is to address. The court, in my view, was correct. I agree with the court judgment 100%. The position of the court was, in fact, affirming our constitutional tradition that finds expression in our democratic tenets. They latched on to the fact that Zambia is a democracy, okay? And in fact, even in Parliament, Parliament itself, Article 61, if I'm not mistaken, the Constitution says the legislative authority of the Republic is in the people, the citizens. And Parliament shall be, and the same shall be exercised by Parliament in a way that advances the democracy that we have. So in enacting a law, you can't enact a law in a manner that doesn't advance our democratic credentials. Democracy requires consultation. So the court was right to say you can't avoid the adoption process that requires consultation. Now, how do we determine what should be amended? How do we determine the people want that particular amendment? What is the safeguard against Musa Mwenye becoming president and just saying, yes, the people want this amendment, without a process that shows clearly that so many people submitted for this? So constitutional amendment should not be done willy-nilly. It needs to follow a procedure, and the rigid procedure is important to avoid repeated amendments. And as I said, the Bill 10 process was objected to, but it had that consultation process. Now, Mr. Mwanza says there are some good things in Bill 7 and some that are not good. If I were to say to Mr. Mwanza, here is a bowl of rice, and there is nice peas in there, there are carrots, there is beef in there, but I've put 2 drops of poison, would you eat it? Just clauses that create problems, it becomes a poisoned chalice. That's why there needs to be wide consultation. These concerns that myself and Mr. Mwanza have on some bad elements of Bill 7 would have been avoided if people like Mr. Mwanza were part of the consultation process to determine what should be changed. And I think that's what needs to be done. Someone asked about the funeral. My training as a lawyer, I generally don't discuss matters that are in court. And that matter is currently in court. And I want just to say a funeral is a very difficult process, and empathy must lead. We must be empathetic. You and I can talk, several other people can talk, but there is a grieving family. There is a widow who has lost a husband. There are children who have lost their father. There are relatives who have lost a close relation. He was our president, but there are people who are closer in the sake of pain than the nation at large. And we must be sensitive, even in commenting. I've seen very vitriolic comments. When did we become this cruel and feeding people that can talk so ill of a grieving family? In the Eastern Province, they have a saying, "Muntu olira swamvara pakamwa." When people grieve, there is an expression of pain. But we who are citizens of the country must not add to that pain by being cruel, by being unfeeling in the comments. I think that's not what Zambians are. We have a term. We say that is un-Zambian. How did we come to that term when we say that is un-Zambian? Okay? We need to get back to those ethos of who we are as Zambians, the empathetic people we are in times like this. And I think one would wish that this period of pain will pass, and that a period of people coming together comes. So I won't comment on the nitty-gritties, but that's what I can say about that process. I agree, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and that's why we must not allow that to get into our country. The several offices in this country are constituted by parliament, by the Constitution. The Constitution has a few limitations, and we must strictly observe the Constitution. The problem with impunity is that it throws away respect of the law, and it is cancerous. It grows to every place. Must avoid that place. Look, there was a complaint about cadarism in the former government. There was that complaint. Now, you tell me, wouldn't it be cadarism for high government officials to be disrespecting court judgments? Myself as Attorney General, if I'm in that office and I speak in a way that seems to be partisan and not respecting court judgments, it may be misunderstood. So for me, impunity must be resisted. At every level, we must resist impunity. And impunity comes in when people are not respecting institutions of government and doing things that are contrary to the law. We are a government of laws, or ought to be a government of laws, and that's what our Constitution requires. As to government contracts and sale of state assets, the Constitution is clear. Those things have to be taken to Parliament, and there must be parliamentary approval for sale of state assets. I was intrigued by the argument that the Mopani sale was not a sale, but it was, I think, what was termed as a transfer. But whether or not we like it, the spirit of the law, in my humble view, is that it should guide whatever transfer. For example, if there was simply a handover of shares, even that ought to take to Parliament and say, why are you handing over shares without receiving value? If there is value being received, the spirit of the Constitution is that it should be taken to Parliament. And I think observance of the constitutional requirements is important. I can't remember the other one, but on the Anti-Corruption Commission, I've been on record several times that the fight against corruption must be non-partisan. It can only be a credible fight against corruption if everyone is being affected. When the fight against corruption is seen as targeting specific sector of society, it is viewed as a bludgeoning weapon against opponents. If you recall, under President Michael Sata, when I was Solicitor General and later Attorney General, at least 3 ministers within a space of 3 years were investigated, removed, and the prosecution started. That was an impact. Even if at that time there could have been former officials who were being prosecuted, it couldn't be viewed as a one-sided fight against corruption because current ministers were acted upon. So an impartial fight against corruption is very important because it would be across the board. And if, I've always said this thing, how we deal with children of the home with regards to the fight against corruption, our own close circle determines how serious we are about with the fight against corruption. So that would be my comment. I don't know, Ambassador, if I've forgotten any questions. There were many.
Yes, indeed, there were many, State Council. Let's just begin to move to closing the debate. I know there are people still calling, but it's a pity that I've apologized that we started the program very late, but we are gracious that Honorable Musa Mwenye waited and waited for us, and for you, the dear viewers, you're also willing to wait. You've heard the concerns. I think the concerns of democracy. For me, my question would be the state of the Electoral Commission of Zambia. You have two seniors in the chairperson, renowned lawyer, but for the first time we are not being led by a judge. We are not being led by a judge. But her political affiliation has let her down because she's been an active member of the UPND. She's leading the Electoral Commission of Zambia. We have another commissioner, McDonald Chipenzi, also in similar circumstances. Then we have two key officials in the Chief Electoral Officer who lost their jobs at the ECZ for something that was not pleasant, and you didn't think that they would then come and lead the election. And even another technical person from the University of Zambia, who's also now a technical member of the ECZ. There is deep concern on the state of the ECZ that they might not be in its current composition at board chair and at technical level to deliver free and fair elections because of their non-issues that stakeholders are raising. What do we do with ECZ?
I think for me, let me make this. The point is that electoral management bodies are important not only for managing elections, but for inspiring confidence in the electoral process and therefore enhancing the confidence in the processes that into ourselves and promoting peace. The Zambian Electoral Management Body, historically, we had Judge Mambirima there, and a few other people beforehand, Judge Chulu later on. The electoral management body in this country has been very respected. Now, the reason why the electoral management body was very respected historically, I mean in the continent of Africa, our rating as an electoral management body, our electoral management body, the ECZ, had been very high. The reason is the deliberate decision to get people who are clearly non-partisan and whose actions are non-partisan. Now, if indeed true that there are these party affiliations, it's a matter of grave concern. Because what we have is a situation where historically the deliberate decision to have the chairperson as a judge is because judges are not usually active members of political parties, and because of the work that they do, and therefore when you get them onto that position, they wouldn't have historical ties to any political party in terms of active politics. That was the wisdom in the historical decision that was made to appoint judges that as chairperson of the Electoral Commission. And I think it helped a lot because the judicial temperament requires impartiality usually. And I think a lot of the people who have been appointed to that body have exercised that impartiality and raised. I remember that when Judge Mambirima was chairperson, even when people like former late President Michael Sata, may his soul rest in peace, when he was in opposition, when he would want to see the chairperson, she would see him, schedule a meeting. And that's how open she was. She would schedule a meeting even at short notice and make it public and say, I met and this, and he would air his concerns. And if you notice, most public interactions, President Sata had a lot of respect for people like Judge Mambirima. And that was important to inspire confidence. We need to get to a place where confidence is boosted in the population on the independence of the Electoral Commission. And if there are concerns, those need to be addressed because it's important that that commission is respected and widely accepted so that people accept the work that they do and the important management of elections is done in an impartial way, and that the electoral management body does not descend to be a party to the current political fights, because politics in its nature sometimes is noisy. We must insulate the Electoral Commission from that noise so that impartially do its work, and the impartiality of its key personnel is very important.
Oh, thank you very much. Wonderful. To our dear viewers, we're privileged to have hosted State Counsel Musa Mwenye, and he's given us insights on Bill 7, I think a thorough view on why Bill 7 remains illegal unless a process that was defined and decided by the court is followed. Any process after that, especially with the action of the Speaker, is no longer acceptable. And the other many issues of governance that he has handled very serious issues. State Counsel Musa Mwenye, may I now allow you to give your last remarks?
Yeah, I think for me, we must always be alive to the fact that Zambia is a democracy. It's a democracy, and we must continue to uphold our democratic credentials. I think the biggest pride for me when our Solicitor General and Attorney General is traveling to the UN in Geneva, talking about our several successes in terms of our democratic governance, that we are able to hold free and fair elections and change governments not once, but now 3 times. I think that's a point of pride. I mean, governments from one party to another. It's a point of pride. We must continue to build upon that. And anything that erodes our democracy as a people, whether ruling party or opposition, that is a point that we must come together and say, let's preserve the democracy. There is no alternative to our democracy. We've tried the other system of government. Some people have been posting and even saying, no, if it's a dictatorship, we must have a dictatorship. And they point to certain instances. But the truth of the matter is democracy is the only system that allows us to correct a mistake. What do you do if you get an Idi Amin? What do you do if you get an Emperor Bokassa who was rumored to have even, been extremely despotic? What do you do when you get a Mobutu Sese Seko? If you are in a dictatorship, only democracy gives us a chance to correct the mistakes that we make in terms of leaders if we have made a mistake. And our democracy has been vibrant. We must keep it. We must enhance. What we are doing here in thinking about these issues and freely debating is part of democracy. It is, I remember that interacting with every president that has been a former president who has left the power, there is one thing that is a consistent theme, and I don't know whether Ambassador Mwamba, your interactions with the President Chiruba had similar sentiments. Those former presidents would always say that their critics were more valuable in hindsight. They should have listened more to some of their critics. The leaders in every level, I mean, respect for critics. So my point is
you are right. You are right. In fact, the best example is recently the late President Edgar Chagwalungu. In his interview with Brebna Changala, he says, Brebna, I wish I appreciated you then. I wish I didn't treat you as I did. And in the next interview with Sishua, he said, look, I think my critics were more honest to me than the people that were close to me. So I think leaders do not realize that the praise singers actually do harm to leaders than they do to build our country. I was just adding.
So the well-informed critic is more valuable to the country and to a leader than a sycophantic supporters. Because sycophants find new people to praise every time. But principled critics will always maintain their position. What I criticized before, I'll criticize now. What was wrong in the previous government is still wrong today. And these positions don't change just because there is a new dispensation, a new government, no. So the well-informed critic to our democracy is valuable. And when we criticize and offer public counsel, it's not out of vitriol or hate. It's because we love this country more than we love any political formation. So thank you so much, Ambassador. It's been a nice conversation.
Oh, thank you very much. No, God bless you, and God bless our country, and God bless your voice. We should never lose that voice. I always respect you, State Council, something I should say here officially, is that you demanded that President must declare their assets, liabilities, and business interest. When you were in private sector, you criticized President Edgar Lungu. When President Hakainde Hichilema appointed you as board chair of the SEC, people thought you'd be quiet about that matter. You even made your voice very loud. You even said you had actually led to declare your own asset as a public official and demanded that the president must declare his assets. And, we shouldn't use excuses of the law not to make those assets public for leaders. So I think many people, and I personally respect you for that even at the expense of your job, threat of termination, you never veered off from that principle that public officials must declare their assets. So we thank God for you, and we thank God for your voices. To our dear viewers, I was hosting Musa Mwenye, State Council. He was Law Association of Zambia. I think one of those youngest Law Association of Zambia chair. I recognize even the current chair is quite young. But, these were leading the path. He was, again, I think amongst the youngest Attorney General, Solicitor General. He's recently been board chair. He's gone back to legal practice. I don't know if he has a political path, but he's gone back to legal practice. And to you, despite all these hurdles, I've noticed that there was a huge turnout on social media. Thank you very much, and thank you for your comments. And for the callers, we could only take so much. I like I said, I apologize that I started late. We've got another guest, literally the elder brother to Mr. Musa Mwenye, John Sangwa, State Council. He's supposed to be on tomorrow, but I may not program it tomorrow. I don't want these glitches and hurdles because I've moved to another area for work. Maybe I'll push it to Wednesday or Thursday, but we'll let you know. We have John Sangwa coming up. And then we have a set of leaders that have been again lined up to discuss the state of our country, state of the opposition, and the preparedness for 2026 general election. So God bless you. Goodbye, and thank you for the opportunity.
Amitapendwa ya vintu ifisume vyote kula kuibukisha Kanate pochimo Wimbo wa temenu wa katongi Awazunga wajita katongi na kula kuibukisha kateka Kaibuku muna kapona Nese koshove pamenso Yangu ama umebaya Iyaba ume
Chicago con que